Now, I'm really excited to have with me today the Scientific Nutrition and Advisory Board. Now, some of you may remember them from last January at our Woodlands event, but how about just some quick intros because it's a really special group of people. We have Dr. Jerry Punch, medical physician and TV sports commentator for over 30 years. Dr. Ekorem, Senior Associate AD for Student Athlete High Performance at the College of William & Mary. Dr. Mark Miller, noted researcher and entrepreneur in the fields of health and medicine, and he has an unbelievable reputation in the industry. And Rob Graf, Informed Sport. He's the guy that certifies our products, so he's really important, and he has many, many years of experience in this industry. So let's get started. The purpose of the video is to gain more understanding of the performance products and how they can help anyone. Now, we're going to cover three areas today: pre-activity, during activity, and post-activity. So let's start with the pre-activity, preparing to perform, and that's our fuel product. Eric, let's start with you. What is beta-alanine and why is it beneficial?
Beta-alanine is I'm going to give you a little science here. It's a non-essential amino acid. So it's a building block of protein that your body naturally makes. The cool thing about beta-alanine is that it develops something called carnosine, which plays a really critical role in your muscle endurance and high intensity activity. So where beta-alanine would be really beneficial if somebody's doing a really hard weight training session, research indicates that it improves your power output and the total amount of work that you can do. If we have anybody that's involved in like combat sports, like they do karate or jujitsu or anything like that, this is a really great compound that can really help reduce your feelings of exhaustion and increase the amount of time that it takes to fatigue. So it's a very powerful ingredient in our product, and I absolutely love it.
Okay, that's a great answer. Thanks for that information. And Mark, let's go to you next. What are astaxanthin and N-extra, and what do they do?
Well, let's pick up an extra first. And an extra is a brand name. And it's a brand name for an extract of a botanical that's called a Piña galunga. That's kind of long-winded. We'll stick with an extra, right? So an extra is an extract of a type of rhizome. Actually, it's very common in Southeast Asian soups and foods and things like that. If you wanted to get a sort of mental image of it, I often talk about it being if turmeric and ginger had married and had a child, it may end up being a Piña galunga. So it's used for a variety of purposes, but I have some colleagues who decided to do some really in-depth research. In fact, they've published 4 clinical studies on it now. And it is involved in both energy production, or that perception of energy, but as importantly as the energy, it's decision-making. So that's corrected. You know, you make less mistakes while you're undergoing some sort of activity, which is very good for sports where you have to have your mental game as well as your physical game. In addition, though, what they've done in some of their research is that they've defined that an extra, when combined with caffeine, they don't compete. In fact, they help each other. And the Anextra has the ability, which is unique in my opinion, I've never seen anything like this, that when you combine it with the caffeine, it prevents that caffeine crash at the back end, some hours after taking caffeine, and where you're feeling that sort of sluggishness. And Nextra just blocks that and maintains a long-lasting level of concentration and energy. And that goes out for hours and hours and hours. So, derived from a food, kind of a spicy food, I guess. And then astaxanthin is completely different. So astaxanthin comes from a microalgae. If you think astaxanthin's tough to say, you should try and say the algae. It's a doozy as well. Hematococcus pluvialis. It's just fantastic the way science names things. It's a funny little algae. So when it's stressed, normally this little single green cell, when it's stressed, it throws up these defenses, which is the production of astaxanthin. And as a result, it goes from green to red because the astaxanthin is red. And it's the same reason why salmon are pink. It's the same reason why flamingos are pink. It's because they have astaxanthin in them. So just like it's really, the essence here is, here's a true explanation from nature as to the benefits of astaxanthin before we get into the science. If salmon did not have an astaxanthin-rich diet, they would never be able to swim up those streams hundreds and hundreds of miles to the spawning grounds. I mean, there's no other fish that really does that type of journey. It's a remarkable journey. And the only reason why they can do it is because of the astaxanthin. And it's a critical element that we can learn from nature. Now, as it relates to how does it work, I get more excited by that than probably most people. So we'll just bear with my passion here for a second. But astaxanthin is actually the most powerful antioxidant that we've come across. So again, nature is directing us. To put it in context, it's about 6,000 times more potent. It's a free radical scavenger than vitamin C. So it's a pretty strong chemical. It's in a general class called xanthophylls, but sometimes we use a subset of them called carotenoids. So it's a relative, say, of beta carotene, which is why carrots are orange. They're all colorful, these things. Lycopene, which is also red, so that's why tomatoes are red. So I'm giving this whole fruity, foody color thing going on here. It's also a sort of a relative of vitamin E. So in addition to being just potent, that's one aspect. One of the more interesting things that's very specific to astaxanthin is that it has the ability to form a transmembrane bridge in membranes, plasma membranes, nuclear membranes, all the membranes that hold cells together, hold organelles within the cells together. And they have a sort of a sandwich type layer between proteins on the outside, some lipids in the inside, and then proteins. I like to think of it as a sort of an Oreo cookie. Again, we're getting back to the foodie stuff. So astaxanthin has polar ends and then the sort of lipid soluble chain right in the center. And so the polar ends get anchored in the cookie part of the Oreo cookie. And in the white creamy filling, that's where the lipid part is. And it's absolutely the perfect size for that. And as a result, it just sort of sits there and protects the membranes. So if any sort of nasty little free radical comes zipping along the Oreo cream filling aspect, it just picks it up, runs it down the chain, and then disseminates and gets rid of it, neutralizes it. And that is utterly unique to astaxanthin. There's nothing else that forms that bridge. For example, vitamin E may be anchored in one side of the cookie, but it's not long enough to get across all the way, and so it's just not as effective. Beta carotene has no anchors, so it's like a raft floating down the river of the white cream filling. Again, useful but not as effective. As it relates to exercise and performance, there is an absolute stack of clinical literature about how it improves performance, recovery, all those sort of aspects. One of the more interesting foci of that particular action is the mitochondria. And I regard astaxanthin as the preeminent mitochondrial nutrient. And you probably don't get up early in the morning and say, oh my God, my mitochondria need to be fed. But you should. You really should. Because mitochondria are the little powerhouses in our cells that make the currency of energy that rules everything that we do. and that's ATP. And in the process of making ATP, we make these free radicals. It's an essential element. As we burn fuel, we create free radicals. And if we don't control those free radicals, then they run loose and just run amok and just make a mess of everything and destroy stuff. Vandalism. And at a cellular level, who wants that? No one. So astaxanthin is absolutely preeminently occupied in the membranes of these mitochondria to make sure that when we make energy, we make it efficiently, we don't make any of the naughty stuff and let it run amok. And we can go back and keep doing this stuff. So, yeah, an extra and astaxanthin, pretty important stuff.
Well, two fantastic ingredients that really set our products apart. Thanks, Mark. Let's go over to Rob. So, question for you. How long before a workout or activity would you take fuel? And part number two, is fuel only for athletes?
Well, to start with, we designed fuel to be a ready-to-consume and on-the-go product. So it's so convenient to take. You can keep it in your bag. Just keep it right there on the counter when you wake up. Probably 20 to 30 minutes before an activity. And the reason I say activity is because the second part of this question is, is fuel or the performance products, for athletes only. Fuel and our other performance products, they're named performance for a reason. They're for athlete performance. They're for my performance, Dr. Punch, anyone who wants to perform a little bit better physically. Perfect example. It was rather hot this past weekend when I needed to push mow my yard. So about 20 minutes before, I take a fuel, and during and after that, took a few extra performance products that we'll talk about in just a second. But these products are made for human performance, and so that includes all of us adults.
I think that's a great point. It's for anybody. A lot of people probably don't realize that. They just think of the workout people, right? Okay, so let's move on to during the activity and maintaining performance with the H2O product. And Jerry, proper hydration is so important to maintaining performance. And from your perspective, what are some key components of proper hydration? And talk a little bit about heat illness and what the symptoms are.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's if I'm talking, and I'm going to make this as simple as possible. If I'm talking to a group of college football players, or talking to some auto racing drivers in a NASCAR or IndyCar, or even occasionally to a group of retirees who are a backpacking or hiking club, and they want to know about hydration and what to look for in heat and stress related injuries, this is what I typically say. Proper hydration is not grabbing a bottle of water and chugging it before you go to bed. I mean, it's a lot more complicated than that. And we'll let Dr. Miller and Rob and Eric and everyone talk about the specifics. But I'm going to be very simple. That the average female needs about 91 ounces of fluid a day. The average male is 125 ounces. And so if someone sitting at home watching this on demand says, well, how much is that, Dr. Punch? Well, that's a gallon. If you're a gallon of fluids a day, and that's if you're not stressing your system. So hydration, and there's a simple way to look at it. Your blood pressure on one side equals your heart rate times your volume. So if your volume goes down, your heart rate has to go up. What does that mean? That stresses your heart, okay? And most of us who are healthy and young, and that your volume can go down with dehydration, and you can maintain your blood pressure because your vessels are constrict. But what happens is your vessels begin to shut down certain parts of the body to maintain your blood pressure, which can impact your kidneys and other organs. So that's why hydration is so important. You may not realize it. I tell people it's like an oil in your engine. You could run your engine without oil for a while, but you're going to be damaging the parts all along the way until it finally shuts down. So think of it that way. Now, as far as heat-related stress and injury, three simple categories: cramps, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. We all know what cramps are. They can come at any time. And I will say this, that the elderly and the young people are more, and people who are overweight are more prone to cramps. We can get into the physiology of that later if we want to, but and people who drink a lot of caffeine and a lot of alcohol. I can't tell you how many times a retiree, some guy says, well, I was an accountant and now I'm retired and I'm going to grab a couple of beers and go on a hike. I said, well, that's not hydration. You're not doing it the right way because alcohol is going to work against your system. He said, well, how about a big cup of coffee? Nope, that doesn't work either. We have to explain to them what we need. But in cramping, as the muscle has a contraction phase and a relaxation phase, when muscles get fatigued, the relaxation phase lengthens out and takes longer. Then as the muscle fibers begin to relax and lengthen that relaxation phase, they get what's called a summary potential, which means suddenly they all begin to involuntarily contract, and that causes that knot or that cramp. So, and how do you treat cramps? Well, normally it's a loss of fluid and salts, critical salts, like we talked about, sodium, potassium, magnesium, etc. You treat it with stretching, with massage, and with fluid hydration. Heat exhaustion. All of us have been out working out, or you see someone who works out in the heat during the day and they'll begin sweating profusely. They get muscle cramps, as the first stage, and get dizziness, confusion, rapid heart rate. Here again, your volume is going down because you're getting dehydrated and your heart rate's going up. You can faint, extreme thirst. Thirst is, obviously we get thirsty for a reason, I tell people. And so if you're thirsty, you need to consume fluids and with critical salts or electrolytes. Another good key there is your urine output. If you're, as the darker your urine gets, it's a simple chart that we have in almost every athletic department in the athletic training area. People can compare the color of your urine. If you come in from a workout or practice, if it's getting dark, then that's a concern that you need fluids and you're getting dehydrated. But heat exhaustion, move people to a cooler area, loosen their clothing, apply wet, towels, fan the skin, but most importantly, consume fluids with critical salts. Now, heat stroke is the third and most severe degree. Heat stroke is life-threatening. But what happens, how do you tell the difference between someone who has heat exhaustion and heat stroke? Heat exhaustion, you're sweating profusely, your heart rate is elevated, you may be confused, a little bit dizzy. Heat stroke is you stop perspiring. Your skin is dry and pale, your heart rate may fluctuate, your breathing may be shallow, you can be unconscious, you can have seizures. But a dry skin and someone who's been out in the heat is dangerous because vital organs like the brain can swell. And so heat stroke can be life-threatening. And that's really the three phases of heat stress and heat injury: heat cramps, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. And it all comes down to how you hydrate prior to your workout, during and after, and what solutions with critical salts you use. And I'll defer those answers to Dr. Miller, who has developed some incredible products which will resolve any of those issues. Obviously, you don't want it to get to heat stroke because that requires hospitalization and a 911 call. And by the way, if you're with someone, and I've been on the sidelines, unfortunately, and I've seen all those phases, everyone's seen cramping, everyone has seen heat exhaustion, and occasionally, unfortunately, I've seen people on the edge of a heat stroke, and we've had to get an ambulance there. So if you see that dry skin behavior, and you've got to get them cooled down quickly, and really fluids at that point in time is not nearly going to be enough. But anyway, that's the Reader's Digest version of heat related illnesses and stress.
Well, that's really good information for this season, Jerry, because it's going to be 107 degrees here today in Texas. Wow. So we're going to need all the help we can get. We're not with Mark there on the beach. Let's go back to Mark. A couple of things. H2O contains electrolytes and vitamins. It also contains energy part and ribose. What are these two ingredients and how do they work?
Yeah. First of all, before I get into that was just a lovely explanation from Dr. Punch while he was talking about the transitions as you're getting worse and worse. It reminded me of the first time I did a triathlon in Louisiana in the summer. Oh my God. Look, I knew it was bad when I was getting ready for the swim and a dead fish wandered by. And then the guy next to me said, yeah, I did this last year. And while I was swimming, a snake bit me. My leg swelled up and I thought, oh my God, what have I got myself into? I had a little bit of excess heat on that particular day. But getting back to the components of H2O, You know, the H2O is actually designed as much for performance as it was for a Texas summer, really. Everybody needs to be hydrated, and we underestimate how much fluid, and I'm as guilty as that of anybody. And one of the things about getting water absorbed across the gut lining of the gut is it's not just water. You know, you're not just sort of just taking water and thinking that's going to be as effective. You can make the actual process of hydration, getting fluids into you, a little faster, a little bit more effective if there are other what's called solutes that come along with it and bring through osmotic actions, if it's through cells or even between cells, which is called paracellular, sort of going through the gaps. And in this particular case, we wanted to make sure that we leverage that with some, in simple terms, called sugars, but they're not actually, you know, sucrose that are adding into your beverage or something like that. D-ribose is a really important saccharide as it relates to muscle performance, but it does help with hydration as well. And the Energy Smart is another sort of branded ingredient, but particularly engineered to improve hydration because it's a very slow release of the saccharides as they're getting digested. They're sort of poking them out through the absorption process slowly and evenly. The real problem with the body is when we sort of overload systems. And if you were just adding in sucrose, like a cola drink or something like that, you can have an excessive burden all at once, these big spikes in blood glucose, and that just really doesn't help. The liver, one of the main functions of the liver is to sort of control everything. It's like a warehouse and say, yes, this is all coming in and I'll distribute it here and there slowly and evenly. And if you overwhelm that distribution process, that's when you get the sort of problems of mismanagement of glucose, and it starts sticking like taffy everywhere. It gummies up the works. So the idea in this particular product is, yes, get hydration and don't overwhelm the system. And that's why H2O is such a low glycemic index, in addition to actually pretty low calorie content. I mean, it's got 10 calories per application. I mean, it's really quite phenomenal.
Mark, that's a really good lead in to our next segment here, talking about post-activity, you know, the recovery, the repair, kind of getting ready for the next performance. Let's talk about the repair. And it's technically classified as a recovery product, but it's really different. Tell us the uniqueness of the product in the post-workout category.
Well, there's a couple of elements in the sort of post-workout repair part, which I'll just sort of cut off and I'll pass it on to Eric, and he can sort of pick up. And that's leucine and glutamine, which are amino acids. Leucine is a branch chain amino acid, and in terms of muscles, that's really quite important. Beyond muscles, but leucine is quite important. The only aspect to talking about that was that it forms part of what's called branch chain amino acids, and that's really got to do with its chemical structure. But the research over the years has shown that leucine is the most important of the three branch chain amino acids. I know Rob laughs at me because I refer to it leucine as being the Barry Gibb of the Bee Gees, and the other two people can't remember.
Oh yeah,
Maurice and Robin, if you want to know. So we gave you the Barry Gibb. There you go. The things that are in there that I think are interesting. Certainly, we have carbohydrates, some interesting ones. Because when you exercise, you do deplete your muscle glycogen, and we're doing that judiciously and effectively without, again, overwhelming the system with too much saccharides at once. But there's one aspect that I really am getting very, very fond of, and anyone who really knows me knows that I really like to sort of slip this into a variety of products. based on the science. And there is a botanical that is derived from the Amazon rainforest called cat's claw, Uña de gato. I spent a lot of time in the 90s, leading into the early 2000s, in the Amazon rainforest, listening to the locals explain to me how they manage their health with medicinal plants. And one of the things that I was incredibly effective in doing was listening to what they were telling me and then translating it over to, Western medicine. And so I would ask, thousands of questions, but I would ask them repeatedly to many people and make sure I got a consistent answer. And it gave me a lot of clues as to what is the chemical structure of the ingredients that are doing this. So, for example, if they extracted it with hot water, I knew it was a water-soluble type of structure, probably quite polar. If they said they used alcohol as the extraction, then I knew it was a very lipid-soluble, sort of more organic type compound, and therefore its actions may be in a different locus. All of those things. But Uña de gato, I was very fortunate to solve the sort of riddle of how it works based on their knowledge within 6 weeks. So I took it back to my labs, and we found out that in addition to being a very decent antioxidant, the main thing that it actually did was it regulates which genes are turned on or turned off through the master gene switch that is involved in inflammation. Fancy name. Again, scientists are not known for great colloquialisms. It's got NF-kappa B. Whatever. We start throwing in great just to make it more complicated for you. So this master switch regulates thousands and thousands and thousands of genes involved in inflammation. In addition, when it's turned on, the repair side is turned off. It's like a seesaw. So whenever you have inflammation, your repair is turned off. That's just the way it works. And that means that you really struggle to get back into harmony and into a balanced state. So cat's claw is a supreme, very potent inhibitor of NF-kappa B. So anytime that you have oxidative stress, as you would with exercise, or in any other condition, maybe related to aging, maybe related to an old injury, a whole bunch of things related to even a poor diet, you can get this sort of low-level smoldering inflammation. And cat's claw is incredibly effective at dealing with that. So I'll just give you one anecdote related to it. I've done lots of clinical trials on it. It just continues to stir my passions and get me going. But in terms of athletes, I'm in the third category of athletes, beyond professional and amateur. I'm a broken athlete. And one of my breaks, I didn't get bitten by that snake in the bayou, by the way, is that I don't have an ACL on my right knee. That got removed. It's in a jar in Louisiana, I think. And so that occurred in the mid-90s. And normally that is a provocateur for arthritis because the joint's so loose. And in fact, I was going to have my knee replaced in 97, 98. And I was in the midst of all this research, and I thought, well, why am I doing all this surgery? I might as well actually take some of my own, stuff, my research stuff. And I did. And within a week, I had sort of negated all the symptoms that were stirring me to have surgery, and I canceled the surgery. And still don't have an ACL, and still have quite a bit of completely normal function, good cartilage in my right knee. So sometimes researchers actually pay attention to their own data. So I'm glad I did. And now I'm trying to share the knowledge by putting it in repair. So I guess the bottom line of what you're asking, Mike, was Is it just for recovery? Yes, it's great for recovery. That's why it's there. But it may be the long-term recovery of a life that's got some living. So I think it's a fairly universal product, not just after exercise.
That's some excellent points, Mark. Thanks. Let's go over to Eric. Let's just touch on the leucine again and why you think it's beneficial. And the second question I've got for you, Eric, since you work with student athletes, and a lot of people kind of take this for granted, but how important is sleep?
Yeah. So first of all, Mark, I just want to listen to you before I go to bed. You have such a soothing voice. And as a geek researcher, all I want to do is hear you talk about this stuff. I'm literally over here Googling certain things right now because you got my brain going. I may have to reach out to you. So if you're listening to this, listen to this 10 times because this is good stuff. I will hit quickly on the glutamine piece. Being in Houston, where Zurvita is located, a lot of the really good literature came out of University of Texas Medical School in Galveston. They were doing research on burn victims, and they started realizing the immunological benefits of glutamine and how it was helping burn victims heal and recover. More recently, that we found that glutamine is really healthy for the gut. And if you want to take some time, if you want to have good brain health, which is the area that I've spent a lot of my research in, you got to have a very healthy gut. And so glutamine is excellent for your gut health. That's a whole nother rabbit hole, but I'm glad you brought that up, Mark. Leucine is really helpful in protein synthesis or building proteins through something called the mTOR pathway. No, that's not Thor. It's a little m, big TOR. Really cool deal. I started doing a little bit of a literature review before we did this, and I found a couple cool articles that I think that people should pay attention to because I think it was pointed out earlier, this isn't just products for weightlifters or, exercise enthusiasts. A recent study with cerebral palsy patients demonstrate that leucine supplementation increased their muscle strength and volume over 10 weeks, and they couldn't even do anything. Pretty amazing. Another study I found in the Journal of Nutrients, there's some really cool stuff going on right now with the leucine, because it really just kind of started making it big in the past 10 years, I would say. And in the research world, it kind of like dominoes start to fall, and then people start looking at all these other things. But they found that low-dose leucine supplementation over long periods of time promote burning of fat. I think we all want that. Reduce hyperglycemia, so helps lower your blood sugar, high cholesterol, decrease body fat, and improve insulin sensitivity. And so I went down the rabbit hole the other day and just went through 20 different papers, and I'm personally fascinated by this now more than just the protein synthesis part. So here's my take home. These products are things that people should all be consuming, and especially the before and after training products, the H2O and the repair. Those are things that you can kind of dose in on a real regular basis. And then on this concept of sleep, when I decided to do my PhD research, I'm like, all right, I'm going to do it in something that really, really matters. So what can you not live without? Water, food, and sleep. If you don't have sleep, you eventually die. So I was like, okay, that's got to be important. And what we found is that sleep really impacts a lot of different things. It impacts your hormones. Okay, so like your ability to repair your tissues, testosterone. Also, it affects your cognitive abilities, your ability to think and make decisions. It's when your brain gets to take a break. And if you don't prioritize sleep, and I'm not just saying, you need about 7.5 to 9 hours of sleep per night to be at your best. That doesn't mean that means you need to actually plan on being in bed about a half hour longer. So I would recommend being in bed for 8 to 9.5 hours. Yes, that means you'll have to prioritize it. And I want to throw one more little bonus at you. Some really cool neuroscience research coming out right now is showing that, okay, this is very relevant for COVID because a lot of us are stuck inside right now. And there's a hormone called dopamine. And dopamine affects like our pleasure centers and our ability to persevere under stress. What they have found is that viewing sunlight early in the day when it's coming up on the horizon, getting out and exposing yourself to bright light actually helps refill these dopamine centers in your brain, which will allow you to persevere under more stress. Later in the evening, especially between the hours of 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., you need to make sure that you have almost zero light coming into your room. Not only does that disturb your sleep, but it will drain these dopamine centers. And right now, there's a lot of people under stress. One of the best things that you can do to help yourself be a high performer or just the best you can be is get adequate sleep, get sunlight early in the day, make your room really dark at night. And so that was just a little bonus for you, some stuff I've been geeking out on lately. And I've been doing that. First thing I do in the morning, I get up, I go for a walk with my wife and kids. And then at night, I make the room as dark as possible, turn the phone over, zero light coming in.
Great information, because I feel better about myself now, Eric. I got up this morning. We had a fantastic sunrise down here. So I started the day off right, and I didn't even know it. Thanks for that info. Yeah. Let's go over to Rob. Can repair be combined with other products like H2O or protein? Can you combine all that stuff?
Well, absolutely, and I'll get into that. But first, for those of you watching this, you can understand you just witnessed a part of my personal philosophy, and that I try to educate myself as much as possible, but I do not have to know all the answers. I just need to know who knows all the answers. And that's why we have Dr. Ekorem, Dr. Punch, Dr. Miller on here with us. But the answer to this question, absolutely. There's a lot of athletes who, getting protein as soon as you can after a workout, it's important. You can combine the repair with Zurvita protein, which brings up a point. Zurvita protein, fuel, H2O, amino acids. Zurvita makes a wonderful amino acid capsule. These are all Informed Sport or Informed Choice certified, as well as Zeal. And we haven't talked about Zeal, but Zeal is our nutritional functional foundation. It's a daily method of operation for me first thing in the morning. It's the foundation that can help the rest of these human performance products work even better. And so, yes, combining products, absolutely.
Rob, explain to everybody watching the value of having our products Informed Sport certified.
Well, we have this conversation all the time because Informed Sport and Informed Choice are both certifications for substances that are banned in sport. In other words, we test the Zurvita products to be free of banned substances in sport. And many times I'll talk to the average person, they're like, well, I really don't care. I'm an athlete. Well, there's so many of these substances that are banned in sport that are really probably not what you'd want in your body anyway. Okay, if you're looking to be healthy and well, can you imagine, let's say that I had cancer and I've gone through some treatments and for whatever reason, my bone density is lessened and now it's time to do some exercise, maybe take a calcium supplement. What if that calcium supplement is contaminated with traces of norangeline? It's happened. We've seen it. And so it's important. It's not just for athletes. This is an elite quality control mechanism because whatever I put into my body, I want it to be clean.
That's a great point. And I really think about the athletes, first and foremost, but personally, I want to know what's going in my body, just like you said, too. And I know you guys do a fantastic job and you're really world known on the certification side. So we really appreciate what you and your team do for our company. Guys, great job. Thanks for being with me today. It's great seeing everybody. And thank you for joining us on demand.